Michael Shank is a senior policy advisor for U.S. Congressman Michael Honda. He's also a doctoral candidate at George Mason University's Institute for Conflict Analysis and Resolution. We thank you for coming on. President Obama expected to speak to the public in about 15 minutes or so. First of all, can you tell us your reaction to today's development? Were you surprised?
Wasn't surprised. Obviously a great day for democracy for the Egyptian people. I think we're about 50% of the way there. I think it's wise that the military fired the cabinet, dissolved both houses. They were considered rigged and part of the regime, part of the National Democratic Party, which was also considered rigged. So I think that's the first 50%, the resignation of Mubarak, the resignation of Suleiman. That's all good. Next steps are key in terms of a caretaker government leading up to the September elections. I know the military is committed to free and fair elections and also removing emergency rule once kind of protests died down. Those are all articles of the Constitution, Article 76, Article 88, Article 179. But a lot of people are feeling that the Constitution can't be amended. That too has to be completely rewritten. So the key question now is who's going to be part of that caretaker government going forward. Military can't be running the country. The populace feels that the military is a good security mechanism, but not the next caretaker government. In terms of what Obama will say, I'm guessing Washington will say that they support the military. They have in the past. The military has been in power in Egypt since 1950, and the U.S. has been a close collaborator with the military. Secretary of Defense Bob Gates, 7 phone calls to the Egyptian military in the last couple of weeks. Admiral Mike Mullen, Joint Chiefs of Staff, also throwing his support behind the military. So I'm guessing that's what Washington will say, with a caveat moving towards some kind of transitional government, free and fair elections.
The White House had to step very carefully here, though, because Mubarak, of course, in Egypt, an ally to the U.S., but with the people speaking so loudly and clearly, change obviously had to occur. And so how will this transitional government be accepted by the U.S.?
That's a great question. So the U.S. really has to have hands off here. Most recent involvement this week by Frank Wisner, who was kind of special rep to Cairo, was a big gaffe because it showed quickly that he wanted Mubarak to stay in power for financial reasons because he worked at Patton Boggs, and Patton Boggs represents the Egyptian government here in Washington. So there's some financial interest, and certainly U.S. Defense Department has some interest as well, given that they've funneled and continue funneling $1.3 billion annually in military aid to the Egyptian military. So I think next steps are critical. Does the U.S. play a role? I don't think so. The U.S. has to support any kind of democracy narrative going forward and has to support kind of a caretaker government. I think it would be a misstep for the U.S. to throw its weight behind the military at this point, given that the populace, while they trust the military for security, don't want to see the military running the country. So yes, Obama and Defense Department have to walk very, very carefully going forward. Now, who should be part of that caretaker government? I know the previous report prior to me mentioned el-Baradei and mentioned Amr Moussa. I think it would be a mistake to have the U.S. front any of those as viable candidates. If Amr Moussa or el-Baradei participate in any kind of caretaker government leading up to September elections, they have to be willing to kind of step out of the elections and say, okay, Egyptian populace, it's up to you now, because Baradei is not popular with the public. Amr Moussa, both elites, and I think the public really has to have its fair say going forward.
Michael, we appreciate your perspective. Michael Shank is a senior policy advisor for U.S. Congressman Michael Honda, joining us from Washington this afternoon. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Well, history is unfolding in Egypt. As we take a short break, we leave you with some of the images from Tahrir Square in Cairo.